Yo, what's up everybody? Today I want to talk about one of the best Spiritborn leveling builds in Diablo 4 Season 9. Now, this is a Poison Rush build, and it is very similar to the build I made last season for leveling. However, there have been some changes. There has been some buffs to some of the basic abilities here, and there has been a rework to the key passive, which is perfect for leveling. The way this works is basically we get more initial burst damage and less that scales with our crit. So we get 180% burst damage every time we crit strike, which is absolutely massive, especially on a leveling build where that burst you can really feel the damage increases. So this build is all about dropping every poison ability you can, dashing to the next target. We have pretty much infinite dashes because we build this around having very high stacks of ferocity and then dashing to use the ferocity and then rebuilding it back up. So moving from pack to pack is instant, and then when we are there, we dump all these poisons, we burst them, and we just destroy everything. This was incredible last season. It took me all the way up to like Torment 2 without doing any actual end game work on it, and it is even stronger this season for leveling. Okay, so let's not waste any time. Straight into the skill tree. From the top, we want to start with Withering Fist. This is your I've run out of spirit ability. You run out of resource, you cast Withering Fist. So, our main ability is Stinger, which costs 44 vigor, and then Withering Fist regenerates 9 vigor per hit. However, we can get Enhanced as well, which gains 1 vigor per second for every nearby enemy poisoned by Withering Fist. So it's a very good resource regeneration, and it fits the poison build quite well. Going into the main section, we want to take 5 points in Stinger. This is your big base core damage, so you deal a good amount of damage to all enemies around you. 60% of base damage is poison, and if it strikes a vulnerable, it also heals you. You want to put Enhanced, and then you want to put Advantageous Stinger. Then you want to take some of these clusters here. I would take all of them. 3 points in Vigorous. Every time you cast a core skill, increase vigor regeneration. 3 points in Balanced. Your core skills deal 15% more damage. And then 3 points in Velocity. Generate 3 vigor per second while moving. And we're going to be moving a lot with our dashing claw. In the next section, in the focus, again, we want to be grabbing more passive. So you want to grab 3 points in Focal Point. And then here you gain, depending on your weapon, you will gain a buff. And the one you want to work on is Glaive. 15% bonus lucky hit chance is incredible with this build. So try and get a Glaive if you can while leveling. 3 points in there, 3 points in Apex, 9% increase vulnerable damage, double it against elites. Into the next section, 3 points into Endurance, casting a defensive skill, grants you vigor. So you can see while we're leveling, we want to take as much vigor generation as possible so we can spend more time casting the abilities that deal the damage. Then, Scourge. Scourge, core forth the wave of insects that bite enemies, fearing and slowing them, so you apply crowd control, and then you deal poison over 6 seconds. So you want to take Enhanced every time you hit an enemy. You gain increased damage versus crowd controlled enemies, and again, casting this makes them crowd controlled. And then you want to do Reinforced. Grants 60% of your max vigor over 6 seconds. Another way to maintain our vigor. Okay, down to the next section in Potency. This is our big mobility skill, Rushing Claw. You basically dash to the enemy, dash from pack to pack. You gain multiple charges of this, so you can keep dashing on repeat with no delay. So this is a huge skill. I would put 5 points into this while leveling. Once you hit max level, you can, drop these points out and put them into more poison. More poison passives would be a better place to use this. But while leveling is a good chunk of damage, so you should 5 out of 5 it. 1 point into Enhanced. Enemies hit by Rushing Claw take increased damage. And then Invasive. Using Rushing Claw, last charge will refill 4 charges, consuming 4 stacks of Ferocity. So the way this works is Ferocity is a stat on a Spiritborn if you've not played Spiritborn before, and Ferocity increases your attack speed. And there is a way we can use our class and our abilities to generate more and more of these Ferocity stacks, and I'll show you how we do that later. And then we have the attack speed, but then we can use them, we consume them to gain more stacks of this, which means that this will almost never be on cooldown. So you can have permanent mobility. So where it might look like it lacks mobility abilities, this one is always up. Okay, next, another poison ability and 5 out of 5. This is just more damage. You want to take Enhanced, and then you want to take Invasive. The swarm bursts every second, applying 30% of its base poisoning damage over 6 seconds to surrounding enemies. We just want every single poison, and then it just ramps up so much while leveling. And as you start hitting endgame, your damage just doesn't drop off. It just keeps scaling higher. Okay, then we want to take all of these poison passives here, 3 and 3. It's your centipede skills deal increased damage, doubled against healthy enemies, and then deals increased damage to crowd controlled enemies. And we have quite a few ways to crowd control. And then finally, we want to take our big ultimate, the Devourer. Now, last season, I recommended the Hunter because this is a really good mobility ability, but it's had some changes coming into this season, and I genuinely think the Devourer is a better play here. 5 out of 5 it to lower its cooldown, so you can see the more points you have, the lower the cooldown. this also just does good damage. You want to take enhanced, and they've changed this season. So now this season, when these blobs hit out on your enemies will take 50% more from your poison damage. Then you want to take exalted finally for the final big damage. Now we have this massive passive cluster, and this is how I would set it up. Obviously you can change this around on preference, but the main things you want to hit is 3 out of 3 on resolution. So when you cast an ultimate, you deal increased damage, and then finally 3 out of 3 on supremacy. So when you defeat an enemy, you build up these stacks of supremacy, increase your damage. When it ends, you gain more stacks and start to lose a stack. It's kind of like a builder spender kind of thing, and it does work as really good damage. Now, I personally like to put 1 point here, 1 point here, just so we have these extra ticks. But again, it's preference if you think there are better places for them. And then finally, the big rework we've had to Noxious Resonance. Your crit strikes cause your poison enemy to burst. Now they've changed this coming into season 9. So this will deal 180% of the total poison damage instantly instead of 100 as it was before. So this is going to be significantly, you're going to significantly feel the change on this as you're leveling, because that's with you as soon as you unlock this point. As soon as you drop a point in there, you're going to feel that massive damage burst. So yeah, that's the skill tree as a whole. Okay, onto the Spirit Hall. If you've never played a Spiritborn before, it works in 2 ways. You take a top ability and you take a bottom ability. The top ability changes all of your spells, all of your, your abilities into a certain type. So if you pick Centipede, for example, all your abilities become Centipede. So Rushing Claw, for example, which is a Jaguar skill, now gets the tag of Centipede as well as Jaguar. So whatever you pick here does that for everything. And then this is just an additional bonus, doesn't change the tags. So for the top one, the one that changes all of our tags, we go Centipede. Hitting an enemy with a Centipede skill reduces their damage, fine, slows them, and deals poison damage over 6 seconds, stacking up to 8 times. That means every ability we cast does this. And the reason that's so good is because more poison, and the slow is a crowd control. So this is just a big win. Everything just leads up to the same things we want, is crowd control and more poison damage. And then for the second thing, I would probably go for this. I've looked around at a few things and I've tried a few last season, and there is a good place to use Eagle, because Eagle gives you crit, and it's quite useful. But I think the way to go here is Jaguar. So you get an increased ferocity, which means you have higher attack speed, and then you gain ferocity whenever you defeat an enemy, which is perfect because as we're moving through these packs, say you poison a full pack, you poison a pack, you gain tons of ferocity, and then when you want to rush and claw, you will consume your ferocity to gain more movement. So it kind of plays into that playstyle of just getting around really fast by playing around the ferocity. So I think this works really, really well. And we don't really need to worry about like ramping up with crazy multipliers while leveling. We just need mobility. We just need to get around fast, get to 60, and then, start looking at our gear and stuff. So I think this is going to be the best way to go. Okay, now let's talk all about the aspects. So here's the build guide. I'll pop it up here. So this is going to be linked down below, but let's talk about the different aspects we want. And this build works without any aspects. If you want to run this completely blind, you just want to throw the skill tree together, throw the Spirit Hall together and wing it, you can. This build does work. So don't stress too much if you can't find these. If you don't want to go into the dungeons and get the ones, if you hover over them, you can see that, some come from dungeons, like this one comes from the Lost Archives, but then some you have to find the item, salvage it, and then re-imprint the item. So, it's kind of, you're not going to have all of these, but don't stress if you don't have them, and it doesn't need any uniques. But let's go through these ones, and if you find them, you will get stronger. So from the top to the bottom, really. Aspect of the Protector, damaging elite enemy, gives you a barrier. There is a lot of ways we can play around, more damage when you have a barrier, so that's useful, and it's good defense. Menacing aspect, Scourge continuously affects enemies around you for 5 to 9 seconds. Massive, Scourge is one of our big damage abilities. Aspect of Infestation, lucky hit. Centipede skills have a 35% chance to spawn a swarm. That's massive. And there's an additional one there. Swarm now also deals its base damage as poison damage. So, you're going to start seeing things that play into the swarm, so that works really well. Again, here we have another lucky hit. When you hit a crowd-controlled enemy, which most things will be, there is a chance for that crowd control to spread to another unaffected enemy, so that's really useful as well. Aspect of Soil Power, lucky hit again. 25% chance to create a Mystic Circle for 10 seconds. Casting a Centipede skill in a Mystic Circle empowers them to apply poison all the time. Now, if any of that is confusing, all you need to know while leveling is get lucky hit. Any way you can get lucky hit empowers all of these aspects, and it leads to more damage. That's all you need to know, keeping it really simple. Okay, on the two-hander, I would be looking for a Glaive here, because that will give you lucky hit from your skill tree, and you want to go with Pestilence. Stinger spawns a Pestilence Swarm at its target location, which deals Stinger's base damage per hit, and they last 50% longer and spiral outwards. And Stinger is our main ability. So you see here, it's our core ability. So it's the one we're going to be able to cast with no cooldown. So this is going to be very, very, very powerful. And if you find any of these, that empowers it even further. So on the neck, I would go for the Binding Morass. Close enemies or those you deal indirect damage to are slowed. You deal increased damage to slowed enemies. You've seen before as well, we talk about other ways to slow enemies. So this isn't the only thing that slows them, but we will get a bonus damage to all of the ones that are slowed. On the rings, Insatiable. Defeating enemies extends the duration of your Touch of Death, which is incredible. When a swarm is replaced early, it bursts up to 300% for the damage it would have done. Massive. And then Rip and Tear. Russian Claw deals increased damage and is empowered based on how many charges it has. Now, the main reason this is so good is because we are putting 5 points into it while leveling, which is significant. You know, it's a good amount of our points. But then additionally, we hit the crit, and there's lots of things we get where it's like, if you crit, the strike additional time is a damage boost. The heal is, you know, is going to help you stay alive. So anything but hitting the overpower here is going to be good while leveling. These aren't massive scaling damage boosts, but they will all be good while leveling when, you know, we're working with smaller numbers, we're working with like smaller multipliers. This just works quite well. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the aspects. Okay, now onto the Season 9 powers, the Horadric spells. Here's what to go for. Disintegrate. Disintegrate is very, very powerful. The way these work is you pick a power or a spell, and then you pick an ability to assign that to. So, you know, when we cast, it works kind of like your mercenaries. When we, yeah, you know, these things here, you know, where we like hire the mercenary, it works like that. So when we cast Stinger, every 5 seconds, a Disintegrate can happen, which is a big damage boost. The additional thing here is if you have a good rank, enemies are slowed. And, you know, we saw how good slow is and how much that works into this build. And not only slow, but crowd control alone. With the neck, we get 30% increased damage to slowed enemies. So again, it's a win-win. Then on these are kind of like modifiers that you put on to change your spell. So the number one you want to get is the Corrosive Vapor. Your spell catalyst now deals poison damage. I'll go down a little bit. Your spell now deals poison damage and or poisoning damage. Enemies damaged by it take 680% poison damage over 4 seconds. Obviously, that would be at max level. This effect could only happen on each enemy every 3 seconds. While equipped, your poison damage bonus is equal to that of your highest bonus damage type. So this is just a huge damage bonus, and just funnel all of your, you know, stuff into that. Additionally, some other things that are good. Shifting Power gives us movement speed. Reactive Ooze gives you resource regeneration, which is pretty good. And then Fractured Core gives us some... it like reduces resistances. So it deactivates monster damage resistances. So if they have like poison resistance, it lowers it. Win-win. It has a negative side to it, but don't worry about it. Level and build, things aren't too hard. Yeah, that's the powers. Okay, now let's talk Paragon Board. So again, level and build, don't stress it too much. Don't worry too much about the Paragon Board, but here's a good setup to get you started. I think poison is going to be huge at endgame. I'm going to be making a very, very end game heavy poison build that's going to be all about scaling as much poison as possible. It should just delete the end game, so that'll be, you know, out as soon as it's ready. But this should get you a good place along the way to move into an end game poison build. So here's the roughly, first off, the boards and the glyphs. The boards and the glyphs I'd go for would be Bane in the first one. I'd go for Bitter Medicine and Consumption. I'd go for Drive and Turf, Sapping and Outmatch, and then finally Vicious Shield and Fester. That's the setup. And then let's talk through them. So as we start, we want to come down, grab both sides, hit the middle here, and go for Bane. Bane is poison damage. Every 5 strength increases your poison damage. And then poison has a chance to deal double the amount of damage. So this is just huge. Get it early, get it first. Next one, Bitter Medicine. Now, Bitter Medicine, you want to go and grab the rare node, which is here. The rare node, when you heal 100% of your max life, close enemies, poison damage. There you go. And causing them to take 10% increased poison damage for 6 seconds up to 40%. So the more you heal, the more poison damage. Spiritborns do have a good amount of like natural leeching, you know, healing. But then you can also have like healing you cast yourself like potions. So this is easy to hit. And then we've got the Consumption Glyph. Every 5 intelligence, your Pestilent Swarm deals increased damage. And you deal a % increased damage for each active swarm, which is just amazing. So once you have these two, you're going to feel really good. This is why you can take this into like Torment 2, push Torment 3. Without any uniques or like any end game build, this is going to take you fairly far with these two alone. Then moving into the next one, Drive. Drive, you want to go and grab the legendary. After moving 10 meters, you deal increased damage, which is fine with our claw. We're going to be warping around. Turf is good. Every 5 strength increases the damage dealt to close enemies. Our main goal is to jump into a pack of enemies and poison them all, so that works really well. Okay, then moving over to the sapping board, you want to get the legendary node down here. So when you cast 3 gorilla, jaguar, eagle, or centipede skills with the same spirit in a row, and everything will be a centipede skill, so that's going to be, you know, guaranteed. Restore 15% vigor and deal 30% increased damage. So that's, you know, a complete passive there for us. Grab this as well. So you want to, you know, grants bonuses to rare nodes and deal increased damage to non-elites and bosses. The rare nodes are max resource, which is pretty helpful, and then 20% increased damage, which is great. On here as well, we have some really good nodes you want to make sure you get, and it's the max resistance. So, you know, 311. Down here, you've got, again, 311. Grab all those, and it saves you worrying about getting resistances on your gear. As well, you want to not worry too much about hitting all the nodes in this one, because we don't have the same thing we have on the others. Like in here, it's every 5 strength increases your damage. Down here, it's like every 5 intelligence increases your damage. Up here, we don't have that. So just get what you need. Just get like the bare minimum strength you need to hit the, you know, additional bonus, and then move on. Down here, I would get the vicious shield board. And that's when you're, you know, once you've got like the 4th and 5th board on, you're going to be thinking hard about end game. So this is where you start getting all defensive. So you'll start worrying about like getting more defenses in your build here. So this works well. The node itself, you do 1% increased damage for each 3% of your life you have as a barrier. And a lot of the end game Spiritborn builds are all about building up like a massive barrier, a massive block chance, a massive like redirect aspects, things like that, and then spinning that into damage. So this gets you in that position early. On top of it, you've got like increased life, increased armor, barrier generation, crit damage. It's all really good stuff. And you can put the Festa glyph in here. Every 5 dex increases the damage with centipede skills. All of our skills are centipede skills. So perfect. And then just grab everything. It's the same thing before. You know, get every dex node. You can get 105 dex total in here. So grab it all. And that's all you need while leveling. You know, it's a leveling build. Don't stress too much about a finished Paragon board. You know, you're going to be moving over to an end game build with more defenses if you really want to hit like T4. But this should massively get you started on your way. So hopefully that helps. That's pretty much everything. If you need anything else like the mercenaries and, you know, the gems or anything like that, or how the build works, order of pressing things, that's all on here. It will be linked down below. It's, you know, it's completely finished, but that's the build. If you like it, do consider subscribing to the channel. Endgame version soon. As of recording this, the season's out in like an hour, so soon I'll get in and we'll get an endgame version done. If you want to see that, do consider subscribing. But thank you so much. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.